prostitution sometimes, and you think, wow, that's terrible, you know, someone must be really down on themselves. But it's another thing when you see child prostitution. When it's a 10-year-old girl that comes up to you and tries to sell themselves to you in a third world country. It says something different. It speaks to the soul. Any moral individual, doesn't matter your religion, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, an atheist individual, because I don't believe that just one religion determines the ultimate morality of a human being. Even an agnostic individual, at some point that has to make you feel something. So when I saw those injustices, when I saw the music industry being set up the way it was, where they gave you a small advance and then they bought out the rights for every single thing that you had, I said the only way that I can do this is to find a distributor that will take a small 10 to 15% cut for distributing the music, for getting it into some stores, and then I will make the music myself. I will bear the sole responsibility of producing, recording, mastering, pressing up the music, and then putting it out. I'm going to write all those things off on my taxes, of course, legally, because I can, and I need to learn the business of music, that I'm going to set up an office where I live, and then deduct that from my taxes. And then I began to realize that it's not that rich people are smarter than poor people. It's just that they know how the system works, and they're doing it legally. That they sit down with lawyers who understand the law and who have made it a business for 10, 20, 30, 40 years to legally cheat the system. The same reason that people who bankrupted this country are not in prison. Because technically, according to them, they didn't do anything illegal. Even though they were the predatory loaners. They were the people who understood how the system worked and convinced a whole lot of people to live above their means because they calculated that they could foreclose on them and then force America, holding their economy hostage to give them trillions of dollars in bailout money. How are all these things interconnected? Because I happen to talk about all of them in my music. But also because you're all dealing with them in your personal lives right now in some way, shape, or form. By the time I came out with Revolutionary Vol.2 and The Third World, it was already in full swing, and I realized that there had always been a market for revolutionary hip-hop, for street hip-hop, and that anyone who has ever made hip-hop or gangster rap or street music has always dealt with some aspect of political and radicalized politics. It may not be so articulated in their music, but it is in their subject matter and in their sentiment. For example, you listen to an album by the Ghetto Boys, We Can't Be Stopped, one of the first albums that they had, and you listen to the actual content, you will find a very political record, word for word. And I think at some point when you look at other rap, even if it's NWA, Ice Cube, of course these aren't people with perfect politics, these are young individuals. And I remind people who sit in this room that hip-hop was not just a Black and Latino art form, but it was also an art form that felt betrayed by the civil rights movement. We felt as if our elders didn't come and educate us in a positive way. We felt as if they were simply judgmental and they looked down upon us. Because how do you teach a child? You don't teach a child with hatred. You don't teach a child with antagonizing him and disrespecting him. You teach a child by taking the time to love them, to understand where they're coming from and what their personal problems are, to work past them and taking the time to realize what you need to dedicate from yourself to their personal growth. If any of you have a child, they're going to learn more by you sitting down and talking with them for an hour about what they did wrong and what they could do to better that, than you simply beating the hell out of them and leaving them in a room alone with welts and a bloody nose for something that they don't even understand happened. I think that when hip-hop came out and you saw a lot of these black pro-Christian groups that were driving over hip-hop CDs with bulldozers or whatever it may be, people who denounced them and said, you're a disgrace to the black race, you know, you shouldn't be making music like that. Who are you talking to? A 19-year-old Ice Cube? A 20-year-old Eazy-E coming straight out of the ghetto who didn't live a Cosby-type lifestyle that you did growing up, going to church every day? No. So when you talk to them, You're supposed to come from an idea of Christianity, and though Jesus walked with the pimps and the pushers and with the sinners, you're going to sit there and assume the moral high ground on a child instead of having that conversation and growth, which is what I try to do now, to have conversations and growth with the youth of America. And even though I love and I relish opportunities like this to speak to colleges, I think sometimes I have more fun when I go to the prison programs and I talk to young children and I see the way that people light up when a young brother of African American descent realizes that his history does not begin at the bottom of a boat in 1622. That it begins thousands and thousands of years before that, and that it's not black history we're talking about, it's human history. And that people realize, hey, I'm not just some part of some big white blob collective of America. I have a history too. My ancestors come from somewhere. Let's look at the constant wars that existed in Europe time and time and time again. Let's look at the way that the Middle Ages was actually set up so one kingdom overlapped another, creating systems of war again and again and again. So that there is no one race that is the pure race, and there is no one race that's a devil race. That's simply the issues that a group of people, that a demographic have endured over periods of time, shape the way that they interact with other people. So when the Europeans first immigrated here, and they were not all good, nice, kind Christian settlers as the mythology of America would have you believe, because what happened at the World Trade Center was not urban renewal. It was the destruction of people's lives. So therefore, how could the colonization, the rape, and the destruction of indigenous people in America be the settlement of America? If you're sitting in that chair, and I stand on that chair while you're still sitting on it, I'm standing on you. I'm not standing in an empty chair. At some point, we need to acknowledge that this exists, and then we move past it. Not because we hate America, but because we love America and we want to put it into perspective so our children don't end up being manipulated by people who have manipulated the mythology from the beginning of this entire social experiment. I think that it has been incredibly important for me to learn not just from average, ordinary individuals, but also from people that you will look at and think, wow, what about your interactions with Chuck D or Lord Jamar? The people who were an integral part of developing the idea of hip-hop were also very much an influence on me. Africa Bambaataa, who invented the word hip-hop, when he said, we are the universal Zulu nation because all races are created equal. Because the idea that we are a different race because we have a different phenotype is absurd. If a white person and a black person, an Asian and a Latino person, it's still a human being that's born, and that's being lost in the equation. That when you demonize one group of people, then automatically it... Where's the button? I guess they didn't like that either. Do I have to move more? Is it like a sensory thing? A fucking somersault? Do that like every 5 minutes. I'll be it. Why? What's going on? We don't need to kick anybody out. There's no one that needs to leave. There's no fire hazard. Is there? Okay, well, there is. I didn't see that there were that many people. I'm sorry for everyone that's being forcibly removed. Please find a chair. I think there are a couple of chairs. People have left. There's a chair open up here. At least give them the opportunity to try to find a seat for the other people that left before you forcibly remove them. Young lady, there's a chair right there. There's a chair right there. There you go. We're finding solutions to the problem without needing to attack that young man who's just doing his job. To get to this entire topic of politics and the radicalization of America, I think that we should keep in mind that, you know, we don't need communism for the redistribution of wealth in America, because American capitalism did that just fine without the ideas of Lenin or Marx or anybody else. We ended up with a complete redistribution of wealth, to where the top % of people were not putting their money back into an economy and then claiming that it was going to trickle down with new jobs that they created. That it's safer for them to keep it in an account where it only earns 2% interest with millions and millions of dollars, and make $800,000 a year just off the interest or off of CDs. That the American economy is not growing simply because of the influx of a horde of immigrants that are actually keeping this country afloat, but because of the nonsensical policies, because of the wasteful wars that we've had that benefit corporations rather than people, because we've been able to demonize people, because we've gone through an era of demonizing Islam now, where we've ignored the misgivings and the horrific things that all religions have done at some particular point, because of a disconnected culture, because of an empire, because of several other reasons, rather than simply reading the dogma word for word. I think that I'd like to put as many revolutionary topics into my music because I think that it creates a conversation. And to me, that's been one of the most important things for me to be able to do. Recently, I released an album that's free. It's called The Martyr. If you want to download it, you can get it off viperrecords.com. And within the story, people ask me, well, is The Martyr about you dying? Do you need to die for revolution? And I tell people, no, you don't need to die for revolution. In fact, that doesn't really help the revolution. What you need to do is live for revolution, because that's a lot harder to do. It's easy to get up and say, you know what, I'm going to rob a store to get some money because I got to feed my starving family. But then how do you compare that to someone who says, you know what, I got to wake up every single day and work at a job that I fucking hate to feed my starving family? Who's being more responsible? Who's really gambling with the lives of their children more? Who's giving more of themselves? Who's sacrificing more? Is it easier to run out and go out in a blaze of glory? Yes, but that's the romanticized version of revolution. Revolution begins with the revolution of the mind, with analyzing who you are, where your people are from, what the principles of this country are. You know, dealing with the Occupy movement all over America, I've discovered that what's really sad is that now we're confronting police officers that are angry because you know your rights. They're angry. I mean, let that digest for a minute. They're angry because you know what it means to be an American. They're angry because you say you don't have probable cause to search me. Or, if you do, or you have to have a search warrant to come in my house or come in my car. And now people are frustrated at that. Why? I mean, if you think I'm just some country bumpkin, or I'm just some random, oh, that's some niggas from the hood. Oh, okay. Well, surprise, surprise. Now I got lawyers. Now I'm suing your whole department. Now I'm coming after you. So really, I'm making your job easier by reminding you that you can't come in here blazing like Bonanza because you think it's cute and you saw it on Reno 911 or something. You live in a real world. People are angry that you're pointing out to them that Thanksgiving is a fake holiday. You know, you don't need to denigrate the white race or Western civilization when you point out that Columbus was a slave trader and a terrible human being. Those two things don't go hand in hand. Just like we've always believed that capitalism and democracy have to be synonymous. Why? Capitalism and democracy have been at odds with each other throughout the entire history of America. The early robber barons, they had child slave labor, you know. Andrew Carnegie, great man, dude, but you had a 9-year-old kid working in a steel mill. Real American icon there. At some point, we need to confront these things. not because we hate America, but because we love America. And we wanted to see it become a greater place, because some people still have the belief that it can be saved. And because if we don't take the responsibility of saving it and of reforming it, then it will descend into anarchy and chaos. That at some point there just won't be any more natural resources. That when you look at Iraq and you say, oh man, no blood for oil. Okay, well what about if it's blood for water? Then it becomes a different story. Then my children have nothing to drink. We're going to war for water. Because that's what the world is going to turn into. And you may not know it, but the people that run the institutions and all the industries of this world have seen it coming for a long time. You don't need to be a fortune teller to tell things like that. There is a limited amount of resources because we live in a planet that has a radius of 23,000 miles. We don't live on an ever-present, infinite amount of space. And that if we don't accept that, and we don't accept the responsibility for taking care of the planet and what we do, and we use ridiculous religious justifications or political justifications, then we don't come to terms with the reality of what we're facing really is. You know, I want people to be able to digest that. And yes, none of you have a perfect past, or none of you can stand here and say you have the moral high ground to judge other people. But at the same time, when you speak your mind, you shouldn't be afraid to speak your mind because you don't come from a perfect place. Every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. You should acknowledge that when you talk, and you shouldn't be afraid to confront those points of view and to ask questions about that. Someone tells you the world's only 6,000 years old. Oh, okay, I want you to prove that one to me. But then someone says to you, I don't think God exists. Really? Prove to me that he doesn't. I may not be able to prove to you that he does, but no one's been able to prove to me that he doesn't. At some point, we've lost the ability to have that civil discussion. And even though things aren't perfect here in America, realize that we're still at the point where these type of discussions haven't become illegal yet. So we should relish them while we have them. Because one day you might wake up in America where you turn to your kid and say, hey man, you know, I remember one time I was in college and we were having this open discussion. And they say, Dad, what's an open discussion? If we don't take this country back, we'll lose it. And it's not their country. It's our country. Yours, mine, everybody in this room, and everybody in this school. And whether you choose to accept that responsibility or not, like I told you, it will come find you. Thank you very much, ladies and
A man who walks with God can walk anywhere. Hence, I fear nothing. The point of guerrilla war is not to succeed. It's always been just to make the enemy bleed, depriving the soldiers of the peace of mind that they need. Bullets are hard to telegraph when they bob and they weave. The only way a guerrilla war can never be over is when the occupation can't afford more soldiers until they have to draft the last of you into the service, and you refuse cause you don't see the purpose. The only way to counter the insurgents that are well equipped is to paint the people fighting for freedom